This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we are right now in the midst of watching the big, beautiful bill pass the House. This is after the Senate decided to allow it to pass. There were a number of defections early on. There was at least 10 Republicans who had come out and said, you know what, we're going to put our foot down. We're not going to pass this bill because we have issues with Medicaid cuts. There was another faction of Republicans, House Freedom Caucus, who said, we're not going to pass this bill because we have issues with how it's going to explode the deficit. Republican lawmaker Derek Van Orden came out, and I'm going to read a quote he said when his party was accused of just being supplicants for Donald Trump, and he said, quote, "The President of the United States didn't give us an assignment. We're not a bunch of little bitches around here, okay? I'm a member of Congress. I represent almost 800,000 Wisconsinites." Cut to Derek Van Orden and the rest of his party, save for like one or two people who were spared, ultimately voted for this bill, to advance this bill. And so can I have your reaction first and foremost to the fact that all of these people who were going to put their purported principles on the line not to vote for this thing ultimately caved in the end?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, not surprised, right? This is what we see over and over again. I mean, if he doesn't want to be a little bitch, he probably shouldn't look in the mirror, because, like this is what they are. There was a story that what Donald Trump was doing to convince them was literally pulling out campaign chum, hats and stuff and signing them, giving them. I mean, these folks have been so debased that like they're not even getting like a new airport.
Right.
They're getting a signed hat.
Yeah.
and that is what the Republican Party is today. And it's not just the House, it's true in the Senate. I was amused to see that that Tom Tillis, who is a senator from North Carolina, who, going back to 2013, he was one of the architects. He was the one of the legislative leaders when North Carolina passed its big voter suppression law, the one that was ultimately struck down for targeting African Americans with near surgical precision. That's what the Fourth Circuit said in striking it down. Anyway, he became a U.S. senator, and he announced that he was not going to run for re-election during the debate in the Senate, and then came out against the bill. And in the press release that he put out, announcing he wasn't running for re-election, he said, essentially, I'm now going to be able to call balls and strikes and act in the best interest of North Carolinians. And I'm sort of left thinking, what the fuck have you been doing for the last decade?
Right.
Like now, like, that's great. Now you can. But we see this over and over again, which is that you'll have some Republicans that say, I'm not going to go along with this big, terrible thing. Then they go along with the big, terrible thing. And then some number of them retire and then are like, I cannot believe people are still going along with the big, terrible thing. And it's like there is like no self-reflective moment among any of these folks in which they realize how they will be remembered. They will be remembered for the cowards that they are. Like, they're not going to be remembered for when they retired, that they did the one thing that they should have been doing all along. They'll be remembered for the dozens and hundreds of things they did. And the people who voted for this bill will be remembered as the people who took away health care from the most vulnerable in order to give tax breaks to the richest.
Well, to that point, can you speak about Lisa Murkowski? Because she had come out and tried to kind of offer up ways in which she mitigated some of the damage. And she said, well, we were able to raise the fund for rural hospitals from, I think it was $25 billion to now it's $50 billion. But what strikes me in that is that, okay, you've got a rural hospital fund that is only necessary because of the same piece of legislation that you're also voting on, which to me strikes me as like, okay, well, I was able to secure all of these fire extinguishers now in a bill that is also going to burn down the forest. And I would presume that a better idea than trying to mitigate some of the massive amount of damage by buying some fire extinguishers is just to not vote for the bill in the first place that's going to burn down the forest.
Yeah, look, I think if you want to understand what's going on with Lisa Murkowski and probably many of her colleagues, just take a look at this clip.
What do you have to say to people who are afraid, or who represent people who are afraid? We are all afraid. Okay. It's quite a statement. But we are, we're in a time and a place where I don't know, I certainly have not been here before. And I'll tell you, times very anxious myself about using my voice, because retaliation is real, and that's not right. But that's what you've asked me to do. And so I'm going to use my voice to the best of my ability. And sometimes it will be viewed in a way that, well, that's pretty confrontational. And other times it's going to be using my mother's charm that I learned as a young girl, and in direct communication with those that I have made relationships with, and am able to affect some change that way. But I've got to figure out how I can do my best to help the many who are so anxious and are so afraid.
Okay, that was Lisa Murkowski in April saying the truth, which is that she's scared. She's afraid.
Yeah.
And if you notice at the end of the clip, she says, it's not right. And so my message to her, to Senator Murkowski, if you're watching, is it's not just not right, it's wrong. What you are doing by allowing fear and intimidation to rule, like, it's okay to be afraid. But the fact that you are yielding to that fear, it is not just not right, it is wrong. And frankly, if Republican members of Congress in the House or Republican senators in the Senate cannot do the right thing because they are too afraid, then they need to resign and let people take their place who are willing to overcome that fear and are willing to do the right thing. Because like you said, this rural hospital thing is a perfect example. Like, they have created a crisis for the poorest of the poor.
Yeah.
The people with the least access to healthcare. And then they put a Band-Aid on it and they proclaim that they are doing something virtuous.
The question then becomes, Mark, do you presume that there will actually be consequences for these people? Because one benefit that they have is they have a right-wing media ecosystem that insulates the entire party from being able to see, or all of their viewership from being able to see what the reality of this bill is. And for example, I'm just going to pull up one basic example. Before this bill would even pass, a clinic in Southwest Nebraska, the CEO of that clinic had come out and said, unfortunately, the current financial environment driven by anticipated federal budget cuts to Medicaid has made it impossible for us to continue operating all of our services, many of which have faced significant financial challenges for years. And so this is an example where a medical clinic had to shut down just in anticipation of these medical cuts. And of course, you're not going to hear about this on Fox News. You're not going to hear about any of the Republicans talking about this because they're still stuck on this talking point that actually it's going to have no impact on Medicaid. Actually, it's going to reduce the deficit when it's going to explode the deficit by $3.5 trillion. So they are operating in an upside down, and they're bolstered by the fact that their entire media apparatus is not going to hold them to account.
So I have to be honest with you. I have become increasingly less worried about the right-wing media, and I have become panicked about the legacy media, the so-called mainstream media. Because sure, the right-wing media ecosystem is not going to report the fact that this explodes the deficits. They are not going to report the damage this will do to rural hospitals. They are not going to report the damage this will do across a whole host of vectors that we have not even begun to think about, but what this will mean for future generations. They're not going to report any of that.
Yeah.
But the question is, why when I pick up the newspaper today, why when I go online, why when I turn on the TV, do I see reports that say Democrats say that it will have this effect? They may even go so far as to say many experts believe. I'm sorry. Like, what are they hedging for? Like, what is the thing that they think if they say this will increase the deficit? What do they think the counter is that they are sort of putting that many experts say, comma? Like, what is the thing that they feel that they need to do? Because that's to me, the great tragedy of this time is, as Dr. King said, it is not the terribleness of the people in Fox News and in the right wing who have interests, business interests, ideological interests in spreading misinformation, disinformation, and lies. The great tragedy of this time is what the supposed good people, right? The people who were entrusted at CNN and ABC and NBC and New York Times and the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune. The question is, why were they unwilling to just stake out the truth?
And I have to ask, you know, we've covered this issue at length. We've spoken about the media. We just had an episode about CBS and Paramount capitulating to Trump. What is it that prevents these people from being able to do the thing that they themselves claim that they're there to do, which is to protect democracy? Democracy dies in darkness. That's Washington Post's longtime slogan. And yet when you have the opportunity to actually stand up and defend your own purported values, that they are so quick to hedge and so slow to actually call a spade a spade.
Yeah. And look, I think part of it is that they have adopted a brand of journalism that requires them to present two equal sides to every question. And so, you know, they are used to a frame of reference in which you have Democrats arguing that if you cut taxes, it will spur economic growth. That was, you know, supplied side or trickle down economics in the Reagan era. You had Democrats who were saying we need to invest more in the middle class and build a social safety net. That's kind of the New Deal through Bill Clinton. These were two competing visions, and they were used to, you know, playing within those 40-yard lines. The problem is the current Republican Party isn't playing in the 40-yard line. They're playing like outside the stadium. Like they're not even playing the same game. And so, but they are still caught in that frame where they have to do that. So that's number one. Number two, I think that they have a business model that relies on that. I mean, the fact is that there is a reason why all of these large media conglomerates are sucking up to Donald Trump in one form or another.
Yeah.
And so they have a business model behind it. But here's the thing, you know, back to this legislation. The Republican members of Congress, they know better. I mean, one of the most fascinating developments in this bill, and it goes on, you know, this happens from time to time in other legislation, but just, you know, look at the number of Democratic members of Congress or Democratic senators. I saw one by Mark Warner the other day, where they are basically saying that Republicans in their chambers are coming up to them and saying, thank you for standing up against this bill. Thank you for speaking out against this bill. And like, you have the Democratic members being like, don't thank me, like vote against it.
Right,
but
do something.
But the Republicans here, they know what they're doing is wrong. Like, you know, the Fox News viewer may not know because they've been lied to. The Republican members of the House and Senate, enough of them know that what they are doing is wrong, that this bill should not have been passed.
You know, the thing that struck me while you were explaining, especially about the legacy media, is there is just kind of everywhere throughout society, there is this, we've spoken about it with the courts, this presumption of regularity. And all of this deference is paid to the Trump administration because there's just this assumption that, okay, the federal government has, you know, deals in facts, has been honest and truthful in their dealings in decades past, in centuries past, and so the courts are going to continue to give deference to this administration. The media outlets are going to continue to give deference to this administration, and that naivety is putting us in a position where, even though we can all see that this president is not the same as previous presidents, but because they were just stuck in this mentality that, okay, this is how it's done, that Trump basically has a clear runway to do whatever he wants, knowing that he's got all of these people in his pocket because they can just, they're got all these people in his pocket because the courts are just going to continue pretending that the DOJ and the administration is acting in good faith. The media outlets are going to continue to do both sidesism and pretend that the administration acts in good faith. And that gives Donald Trump a huge advantage, a huge leg up, because instead of being able to get called out for what he's doing, he knows that all of these institutions that we rely on to protect us, whether it's the courts or the press, those are stuck in this archaic mentality where you know, they're not going to be able to call him out for what he's doing because they just refuse to adapt to the moment that we're in right now.
Yeah, and you know, Brian, I want to add one thing that may be unpopular in some corners, and I want everyone watching this video to really think about this. The Republican Party has now systematically dismantled a big part of the safety net that protects the vulnerable in our society. They have mortgaged the futures of your children and your children's children, to give tax breaks to the richest of the rich. They are potentially going to create deserts of no health care in rural parts of the country. And every minute that a Democrat spends, or someone who cares about the vulnerable spends, attacking Democrats, is a time you're not spending time on that.
Yeah.
You know, like the real villains of this whole thing are the Republicans in Congress, the Republicans in the Senate. They had the ability to prevent this. And you know what? Every single Democrat in the House and every single Democrat in the Senate voted against these bills. So the next time you think you want to criticize whether it's Joe Biden or, you know, or you're a member of Congress or someone else's member of Congress, or, you know, who's running, you know, for this office or that office, like, just ask yourself, why aren't you focused on what the Republicans are doing? Because they are the ones, not the Democrats. They are the ones who are the great threat to democracy and to the future of this country.
Right. To that exact point, we live in an attention economy, and everything we talk about is inherently to the detriment of something else. And so while I'll be the first to admit that Democrats are certainly not perfect, the villains in this story, the people who are taking healthcare away from 17 million people, the folks who are stripping food assistance away to the tune of $300 billion, the people who are making sure that 18 million kids won't get meals in school, the people who are going to be responsible for 300 rural hospitals closing, the people who are exploding the deficit to the tune of $3.5 trillion, none of those are the Democrats. These are the Republicans who are pushing forward this bill. These are the Republicans who made sure that this would become law, and these are the people who deserve everybody's ire. So again, in an attention economy, we make conscious decisions about who we're going to focus our attention on, who the conversation is going to be about, and let's not lose sight of the people who are actually doing it in this instance, which are Republicans, even those who come out and say that that they understand just how damaging, just how dangerous this legislation is going to be. To that point, we've spoken quite a bit about the media in this episode. Highly recommend for folks who are watching right now, if you're not yet signed up for Marc's YouTube channel, if you're not yet subscribed to Democracy Docket, I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Especially in moments like these, it is essential that we elevate the voices who are meeting this moment with the urgency that it deserves. So if you're not yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.